Maybe, James, could you just have a look and see if that's everybody outside, and then we can go. So we'll just give people a minute to arrive, and hopefully we'll kick off then. That's good? Okay. Folks, fantastic to see so many of you here. Very, very warm welcome, especially if you've just arrived to the LBC Sangha Day. We've had a very, very packed day so far. A really, really good day so far. So I'm really delighted to see that. Very warm welcome at home if you're tuning in from home as well. This is the LBC Sangha Day Festival, where we particularly celebrate the jewel of the community of the Buddha's followers. We've heard so far. We had some mantra chanting just there, and in the morning we had some really fantastic stories from order members that have now passed away, that are no longer with us, and it's been really, really good. So we're about to have the keynote talk from Dayanatha, and I'll introduce Dayanatha in a moment. But before I do that, just to say, after the talk there'll be dinner at around 5 o'clock or so. So do stay after the talk. We've got Simon, commonly known as Simon the Chef.
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock, sorry, so dinner at 6 o'clock. So Simon, colloquially known as Simon the Chef, known as Simon the Chef for a very, very good reason. Simon is an excellent chef, and he'll be cooking some food up. So do stay at 6 o'clock, there'll be that. And everybody's welcome. And then we've got the Mitra ceremonies then after that as well. Really the highlight of the day actually is seeing people declare themselves in a ritual form to be Buddhists and to doing their best to follow the Buddhist path. So that's what we've got coming up. So do stay around for that. Yeah, and I'll by way of introduction. That's a good word. Introduction to Dayanatha. It's very, very. I really considered, in fact, I know Dayanatha to be a very, very good friend. We've been very good friends now for quite some time. I said to him earlier, I always wanted myself and Dayanatha shared a room for 3 years. That always sounds romantic, but it wasn't romantic. We shared a room in the men's community upstairs for 3 years, and in that time I think we got to know each other very, very well, didn't we? Yeah. For good and for bad. That also sounds romantic. Dayanatha had become a very, very good friend of mine, and one of the qualities, in fact two of the qualities, and they're related and they complement each other, of Dayanatha's is that he has both a very strong instinct for help and a very strong capacity for help. Now sometimes some of us have one or the other or neither, but rarely both. So sometimes we have a very strong desire to help but don't know how to, or we know how to help but we don't want to, or we can't do either, which in some ways is more straightforward. But Dayanatha has both the very strong instinct to want to help, a very, very strong desire to help, to go out to help people, to relieve suffering. He's a GP, and his job is, part of his job here, he's partly Mitra convener, partly GP, and his job is to relieve suffering in the world, both as Mitra convener and as GP. And I think that's a very, very strong instinct for Dayanatha. When he sees people who are in need, he wants to help, and that's his name as well. His Dayanatha means Lord of Kindness, and he very much lives up to his order name as well. He's very, very strong instinct to want to go out and help people, and he also has a very strong capacity to help people as well. So I know for a fact that Dayanatha is an excellent GP, knows how to help medically, and but also has a very strong capacity for help irrespective. So Dayanatha is just one of these people you can just go ask for help. He'll have a very, 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 very wise sense of advice in all sorts of areas, be it communication or work or whatever it might be. Very wise, very strong sense of what the good thing to do might be able to do. But he also can come in and just help in many different ways. He can pretty much turn his hand to anything, Dayanatha, and have a pretty good go of it. So Not that long ago, he was giving me driving lessons. All sorts of ways, technically proficient, really efficient whenever he does it. Just to say a little story before I wrap up, myself and my brother were off hiking there in Cornwall not that long ago, and my brother, who's this tendency to pick up infections in his feet which can leave him sort of in bed for days taking antibiotics, and he picked up a little infection in his foot, and I called Dayanatha that night to say, well, hey Dayanatha, could you sort of have an online, a sort of on the phone, over the phone talk with my brother Pete and see what we can do. And of course, you know, he was very, very good with him, and we got the antibiotics and everything like that. And some days later, we were still hiking and really saved the day. Dayanatha saved the day. But I was so grateful at the time that I had a friend like Dayanatha that I could call up. I knew he'd put everything down to talk to me. I knew he'd want to help. I knew he'd give very good advice. I just thought, geez, I am blessed to have a friend like Dayanatha in my life. So without further ado, I'll let Dayanatha take it away.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Andy. I've got a few things to say about you actually in the start. Don't you worry. Very good. No, thanks for that. It's really a nice welcome. And yeah, really nice to see everyone here today on Sangha Day and online as well. I really love Sangha. I was saying this morning, it really means a lot to me, and so I'm really grateful to be able to share a bit of some thoughts I have about Sangha. In a way, all my thoughts really come from this book, What is the Sangha by Sangharakshita. So I would recommend that if you haven't read that, it's very, very good. So that's sort of the credits. And I'll come on to the talk. So yeah, in a way, with this talk, I just want to make one point. And the point I want to make is that the society we want starts with taking responsibility for our own minds. So the society that we want starts with taking responsibility for our own minds. And in a way, that is the point I want to make. I will say more than that, actually, because to be fair, you paid your donation, you probably want a bit more than that. So I'll try and unpack that. But really, the whole talk sort of keeps coming back to this point, that we need to take responsibility for our own minds if we want for the society that we want. But first of all, I guess let's unpack that a bit. What is society? Because it's a term that's sort of bandied around a bit, but it's a bit abstract, isn't it? So it sort of lives, I don't know, in the ether, doesn't it? Sort of society. When we say society does this, does that, and we often sort of blame. It's quite easy to blame, isn't it? Society. So we say like, oh, because of society that I'm like this, or that person's like that, or this is happening because of society. So it's sort of very easy to blame. But really, society, well, is us, isn't it? Society is us, it's people. And to be more specific, it's sort of bodies of individuals that living as a community. So that's how you can sort of define society, like bodies made up of individuals living communally. And we have like organisations, governments, and different sort of groups within that society, don't we, that form up the sort of major society. And and there are different scales of it, of course. You sort of, even starting off with just sort of your family group. That's sort of the first group, isn't it, that we sort of brought up in. It's like a mini society. And then that sort of gets wider, doesn't it, when you go to school and suddenly you have a school group. You've got your neighbourhood group. You've got your religious group, if you brought up religiously, your sports group, your bigger school group, your work group, and then there's like the town you live in, the country, and it sort of goes wider than that. So sort of you can see that society is made up of sort of smaller groups as they get bigger as they expand. But within those groups, it consists of course, us individuals. And the point is that we're made. Well, I think basically we're obsessed with society. We're obsessed with the group. So often we like to think of ourselves as individual and independent, and we know what we think. But really, we have a very, very deep instinct for society, for the group. And we're actually, if you think about it, we're quite obsessed with it. So, for example, Whenever you go to a dinner party or sort of meet other people, you end up talking, the key topics are usually something to do with society and how it's working and how we're being governed. And if you look at the news, for example, all the main news stories are all about how society is being governed and, what this leader's saying or what this leader's done or who they've emailed or whatever it is. So you can see that we're obsessed with it, and the news knows that and sort of feeds information about society all the time. That's on a sort of national scale. On a sort of a more mini scale, we're also obsessed with it in terms of how each other's doing within our little groups. Have you noticed that? I've certainly noticed that as Amniodin was saying, I'm one of the Mitchell conveners, and I often go for walks with people, and I sort of have long, deep conversations most of the day with people all the time. And I noticed that we can talk about serious things and practice, but then when it gets to like how other people are doing and how other people are affecting that person, the sort of conversation lights up. Have you ever had that experience where the sort of almost like gossip and how everyone else is doing is like the sort of the juicy bit and the interesting bit, and the sort of it's particularly like we're particularly concerned, aren't we, if somebody else has done something wrong in the group, or they've not done what we want, or they've said something about someone else, or we're sort of particularly concerned about that. We spend a lot of time thinking about others within the group and in a way our place within the group as well. And of course the reason for that is that runs very deep, that group instinct, and that sort of we've evolved with it. Don't know if anybody's seen Frozen Planet. Have you seen the latest Frozen Planet? There's a beautiful scene that sends us to the Japanese mountains, and it's snowing. It's very snowy. It's very, very cold. And out in the mountains lives these Japanese macaques. They're sort of monkeys with like really pink faces. Have you seen them? And the scene starts it's zoomed in, and it starts off by just showing a hand. And you're not quite sure, and the hand looks so human, you're not quite sure whether it is a human or not. And that's a beautiful start to the scene. And suddenly you see a hand with all the nails sort of brushing itself. And the arm's very hairy, and you think, okay, no, it's not a human. But you can't believe how sort of similar the hands are to humans. And then the scene expands, and you see that these macaques are enjoying a hot spa, a hot bath, in a geothermal pool in the snowy Japanese mountains. It's freezing outside, but they're like loving it in this, they're living it up in this pool. You can see that some of them close their eyes, and you can just tell they're making like similar expressions to us. They're just like they're getting in like we would in a jacuzzi. It's amazing, but what's interesting is that they've to get into the pool, they have to be like they have to be doing well in the group, and the pool is the access to the pool is administered by the dominant female of the group, and she like knows who can come into the pool and who not, and depending on your sort of status in the group. And there's this scene where these two, I think males, like jump into the pool and they like love it, and then the attendant is like, no, you can't come in, and like shrieks, and they have to get out, or like sort of cower out when they're dripping wet, and I just think it's amazing that that animals, or where we've evolved from species that have the group dynamic at the heart of how they are. For their survival, they need to do that for their survival. Just to follow on, what happens is because the males get excluded from the hot spa, they run away, and they're about to freeze to death. And then there's another scene where two males see each other, and they start grooming each other, and they end up hugging each other, and for warmth, and that way they survive, which I think is a lovely symbol for cooperation, if you see what I mean. That they just sort of that animals can do that, come together, cooperate, as well as sort of fight and have status and all that sort of stuff as well. So we've developed that from, we've evolved that group instinct from that. In fact, if you look at our faces, for example, so muscles aren't meant to attach to skin. So muscles like the muscles in our arms, for example, if they're attached to the skin, they wouldn't work. So they have to be attached to the joints and the bones to sort of pull my arm up, yeah. But the muscles in the face are the only muscles that are attached to the skin. And of course they're attached to the skin because the movement of those muscles is a communication tool to communicate between each other. So we've, even within our whole being, we're sort of designed to communicate with each other and read each other, so we know if someone's happy or sad. Even we're some of the only animals that have the whites of the eyes showing as well. If you think about it, it doesn't make sense, because with eyes you want it to be as wide as it can be to let as much light in, but of course a lot of the eye is white and there's no sort of vision, a light coming into that bit, it's just white. But the reason why it's white is so that I can see where you're looking, or you can see where I'm looking at you now. And also we can sort of detect if somebody's lying as well, or somebody's being deceitful, or as well as sort of detect if there's love there, or where that person's looking. So you can see that we're designed from the biology up for the group instinct to sort of work together, to cooperate, to survive with each other. So I think, in a way, the point is that we ignore that at our peril. If we think we're these independent creatures that doesn't need anybody else and can sort of just do it ourselves, then we're ignoring like millions of years of evolution, if you know what I mean, even before we get to sort of the Dharma and the other bits as well. So it's just really good to sort of remember that. And I think that's why we have an instinct for society, and we want a good, we all want a good society. We want society that works, that cooperates, where we can live, where we can be safe, where we can enjoy life and prosper. We all have an instinct for that. But of course, what happens, of course, there are problems in society, and it's not as good as we'd like. And especially being a GP, as Amniodim was saying, I sort of feel like I often see the sort of problems in society sort of right on the front line, so to speak. And I think a lot of the problems seem to me that they come from, going back to this premise, they come from people not willing to take responsibility for their own minds. And I don't mean that harshly. I mean, they sort of don't really know, people don't really know that that's what they have to do in a way. And often they come and see me or other GPs sort of hoping that, I can fix them and their problems, or I mean, that's not unreasonable, is it, when you go to your GP, to be fair? But often I think, why are you telling me all your problems? And I was like, no. I remember I'm a GP, I'm trying to help. They sort of, but often I think, when people tell me their problems, I think, I can't help. I feel like I can't really help you. In a way, you need to take responsibility for your mind. I can try and sort of teach them how to do that a bit, but not in 8 minutes, and I've got to write the notes as well. And so I feel like there's sort of pain of that in a way. And there's a lot of suffering, and it seems to be sufferings based on, for example, like what's interesting is, especially I work in East London, and there's a lot of people that have come from, born elsewhere, and they come to London sort of hoping to live a better life, and hoping that, the UK society and the modern world sort of thing will help them, and they've sort of made it. And they come to me, and what's interesting is that a lot of people that do that are quite depressed. So they come, even though they come to the country they've always wanted to come to, and they've now got, more prosperous society, and free healthcare benefits if they need it, etc. They seem to be like quite down, and often they say things to me like, I just miss all my friends and family from back home. And that just makes me think, God, that's really one of the most important things in life. I mean, you can sort of move, you need that community, otherwise you are going to be depressed. Or I get people that come to me and they just don't know what to do in life. So life's not worked for them. They've been promised a sort of good life based on university and making money and all that, and it just doesn't work, and they just don't know what to do, and they don't want to work either, so they're asking for a sick note, and they're too stressed to work, and or they're addicted to things, substances. So something's not working there either for them. And finally there's all the social care stuff as well. So often you get these sad cases where like elderly people living on their own, with like no family around to care for them, and their carer, who's sort of a nurse that comes in, doesn't really know them, often calls me and says like things, oh, will you go and do a home visit because they're on their own and they've got this or this wrong with them, and I go, and again it's very difficult to help because without support, I can give them medicines and bandages and stuff, but without support, how can you really help someone? So I mean that's sort of the society we live in at the moment is very much like that, isn't it? That especially when it comes to the elderly, we're not quite sort of able, well, we're not quite there for them, maybe enough. So those are sort of the problems, never mind sort of crime and poverty and all that sort of stuff that I don't really get to see, but I mean there's other problems as well, but those are the problems in society that I'm experiencing, and I think Sangha has something really to offer here. And what Sangha is in a way, Sangha, well, the word Sangha, it can mean society in its broader sense. But what we mean by Sangha here is people like us that want to take responsibility for our minds. When we come together in that way and practice, then we're Sangha. We're a group that's come together, that's practicing. And actually Sangha, I'll say a bit more about this later, goes beyond even sort of group in the way we know it. But you can think of Sangha, as I say, as a sort of the Buddhist Sangha as a collective of fellow practitioners, people that are like us, trying to take responsibility for our own minds and doing that together. But I guess the question is, and the question is for me, like, how do we take responsibility for our own minds, and how does that help with society? So, anyway, I want to answer this in two ways, and then that will be the sort of fullness of the talk. So, I think we take responsibility for our minds, firstly, by how we see the world. So, how are we actually seeing the world? We need to take responsibility for that first. And that also includes then what we do in the world. So that's sort of the first point, like how we see the world and what we do. And then the final point is then how do we relate to others based on that? Okay, and that will be the sort of, say, the rest of the talk. So first of all, let's look at how do we see the world, because that's the sort of basis that's the sort of basis for our life, isn't it? How we see the world. Well, the Buddha would say that we actually see the world through what he would call a wrong view. So we see the world through our minds and through a filter that's sort of given to us to help us sort of survive. So we see the world as fixed, see the world we think we're a fixed and separate self. And we think we're seeing the world objectively, and everything we think is very rational and independent from others. So we think, almost like I think we see the world as if we're watching. When you play a film, that's sort of a film's going on, isn't it? And it's objective and it's there. I think we see the world as if we're watching a film. That that's just the objective film happening out there. If you see what I mean. When really what's happening is that you're seeing. And I'm seeing the world through lots of different filters and layers in a way that are designed to help me survive. So I was thinking about this the other day. I was just on the tube, actually. And when you're on the tube on the District Line, and there's nice carriages, it's air-conditioned, space, and normally you sort of go for your phone, don't you? And I normally message Amalioden about various emails and stuff. I thought, I'll just not do that today. I'll just sort of sit, just sort of stand there and sort of look around. And I started to look around and I started to see all these different people on the tube. And, there was some children and there was some elderly people and there was some people my own age and all different backgrounds. And it's quite interesting it's quite interesting to sort of people watch, isn't it? Sort of looking around different people. I just had this thought like, oh, wow, each one of those people have got their own consciousness, if you sort of mean, and they're seeing the world through their eyes. And I'm seeing them through my eyes. And then suddenly I thought, and also I'm seeing all those people based on my own sort of preferences and who I am and prejudices in a way. Like, for example, there was someone that looked a little bit threatening, and I was a bit like, oh God, I better stay away from him. And there was someone that I was a bit attracted to, so I was like looking at them, and then there was like, you know, just some I think there were just like some younger people that were just sort of playing around, and I was thinking, oh, that's an interesting life, that they're just playing around and not no cares in the world, sort of thing. But that was sort of interesting. And then I just thought, hang on a sec, I'm seeing all these people based on whether they're a threat or whether they're attractive to me or through me. You know, I'm sort of seeing all these people based on, in a way, what benefit they have to me. Even the older person, I was thinking, oh, they're just an old person. You know, wasn't really interesting to me, still to me. And I was thinking, sorry if you're... but I was thinking, oh God, I didn't realise I was doing that, if you see what I mean. And it was like the awareness of that was a bit revelationary. And then I thought, oh, hang on a sec, everybody else is doing the same thing as well. And the older person isn't thinking, well, I'm an older person sitting here, older person. They're just thinking, I'm seeing the world like this as well. And there's maybe a younger person. Why is he staring at me? I don't know. So anyway, that was just a little reflection that I was having on the tube. But it is true, isn't it, that we do see the world through our own eyes, if you see what I mean. And what the Buddha's trying to say is that we need to be really aware of that first, because if we're not, what will happen is that we end up living based on this delusion, and in a way, the delusion that we're objective, fixed, separate, independent, and we end up living life to try and feed that delusion. So what I mean by that is we get stuck in greed and hatred. So we get stuck in this sort of this view that what we need to do is get loads more stuff, then we'll be happy, or we need to push things away and then we'll be happy. Because we're fixed and separate, we just need more stuff for ourselves, then we'll be happy. And I think that's very strong. I mean, I remember doing my A-levels, with the hope of life ahead of me, and you know what I'm going to gain from life and what I can get from life. And I remember the thing that got me through was like a picture of a car that I put, like a new car I had on my wall, and I thought, look, if I just work really hard, then I can afford a new car, and and do well in life, etc., etc. And that's what I need in life to be happy, sort of thing. And I think most of us have that story to some degree, maybe not the car, but we want like a nice house, a nice life, and all the sort of that gives us. We want comfort. And of course, society is based on that. So because society is based on individuals, society is based on that. And and the marker of society, of course, is how well we're doing financially, the economy. So in the news at the moment they're saying that we're going into a recession and that's really bad, and and that's in a way, isn't it, the main marker of how well we're doing in society, whether we're making money or losing money, basically. And I just think, why is that? That's so shallow, like there's way more to life than that, if you see what I mean. But it's sort of built into our psyche. It's coming from us, then it's also reflected back to us in society. That's what we need. We need to be doing well, because we then internalize that, of course, and think we need to be making loads of money and to do well, or we compare ourselves to others, and we need loads of things, and actually we all know, I think we have an instinct that it just doesn't work. Like, yes, it's nice to get some nice things, of course, and but it just doesn't work. The more things we get, in a way, the more worried we are. The pleasure from new things doesn't last. So we can't base life on that. That's what these people coming over, I think, to the UK are experiencing for themselves. That yes, they've got a nicer life, say, but they're still not happy. Or we're living in this sort of, I call it this sort of Amazon comfort world, aren't we? Where it's quite amazing, really. You can sort of just click a button, and the next day you get what you want. Actually, to be honest with you, I'm a bit addicted to it sometimes. And have you ever had that thing where you sort of get an Amazon package in, and you've ordered so many, and you've been so busy that you can't remember what you ordered, And you just sort of, and you just think, oh, cool, that's sort of like a present, a gift. And you open it, and it's just some socks or toothbrush heads or whatever you've ordered. Or anyway, maybe that was more of a confession than a sort of general point. But I think we do have this. We do just want more. We just sort of want more comfort and want to buy more things, basically. And the world supports that. We don't think like. Sometimes you can buy something at 10 o'clock at night and get it the next day, and you don't think, who's actually packaging that for me at 2 a.m. and then driving it over to the LBC? Or the effect on the environment, of course, of that life. Because the more, of course, we buy things and the more we consume, the more the environment suffers, and we all know that there's a big area there as well. And in a way, that's sort of the heart of the problem, isn't it? Consumerism causes the problem environment. So that's interesting that we're measuring life based on the economy, aren't we? How would it be if we measured it in different ways? I was just thinking if you had like a sort of, meditation meter instead of like an economy meter, so it'd be like in the news, like this week we've been meditating a lot, or this week we're meditating a lot, or in Bethnal Green we've been meditating less. And that's how we measure the world. Or this week the world's more beautiful in this area, or these people are happier. Can you imagine if we were doing that instead, and the news was doing that? But of course we're not. Even at work in the Windows PC, in the bottom there's like this information. There's the clock, and then there's like the stocks, and there's like Amazon shares or whatever. And I don't have any Amazon shares, but come in, welcome. But I do see every day it goes up by 3% or down by 2%, and I didn't even choose to have that on, but that's what the world's feeding us all the time. This thing that we need more money, and it's all about money, and that, and it sort of works. It works in some ways, doesn't it? Because we've got to admit we do have a pretty good life here in the UK. I mean, quite comfortable, and we've got everything we need. None of us, everyone's going to go home tonight and have somewhere to live, a pretty comfortable place. Obviously, there's different places to live, but we're all pretty good. But it only works at this level as long as there's prosperity. So as soon as like the world becomes more unstable, which it usually does do at some point, then it starts to break down. There's riots or one group turns into the other group. So it only works. It doesn't. It's not a safe bet. It's not a good refuge to be on. Yeah. So got to remember that. And as I say, even within ourselves, it doesn't work in general. The pleasure sort of diminishes. So just to say, finally, after I'm 37, and on Friday. I did buy a new car, so I'm thinking about that for a few months, and I was sharing a car with someone else, but that ended, and I did buy a new car. And I chose a hybrid, and below the cheapest trim and not leather seats, and was as good as I could be, but I also secretly was very excited about it, and I thought, oh yeah, brilliant! I'll have freedom, and I'll be able to do things and take people on retreat, and it'll be really good. Drive it, exciting. It steers for you on the motorway, this car, some fun stuff like that. Anyway, so I drove it last night. I took Pranayogosha out, and had this, and it's quite exciting, but on the way back I was just driving, and I had this funny feeling, where have I sort of had this feeling before? And I realised it was just a car, and I was just driving, and I've driven before for many years, and it's not going to do anything extra, just what I mean? It's just like, it's just a car. And it sounds obvious that, and people are thinking, what's he talking about? But for me, it was like I'd made it something else. I think that's what we do in life. We add our own sort of story to things. That if we get this thing, then it will give us this. And I've been doing that with this car. It'd give me this, and I was driving it. It was just like, it's not giving me. I'm just driving. It's not giving me anything more than that. You know what I mean? So I think it's good to remember that. I'm not going to take it back, but it's good. I think it's good to remember that. So and on the other hand, So anyway, that sort of brings me to the sort of final bit of the talk. The sort of in a way, what would the Buddha say in this sort of way, and how do we relate to others from what the Buddha would say? So the Buddha would say that the more we practice, the more we meditate, the more we'd see life how it really is. So we'll see the sacredness of life, the beauty of life, the moral good in life, and the more we won't need to buy all these things to make us happy. The more we'll just be contented. And I've really felt that sort of practicing all these years. I have felt more content, and I sort of even shared a room with Amalioddin. It was nice living with Amalioddin, but it was like I'd given up my own room there, and I was in a bunk bed, and I was like, it didn't matter because there was so much joy and friendship and love in the community and practice that even I didn't really need anything else. If you sort of mean, didn't need my own space. So it does give you that. But there's always this battle, and this is the battle we have to think about in our minds between the sort of spiritual contentment and the worldly pull for greed and for more. That's always the battle we have to sort of fight in our own minds, because I'm not enlightened and I still have that battle. I want more things, but actually also want contentment and truth, and I want a mind that is more real, and there's always, I think we always have to have that battle as we practice. And as long as we're aware of that, we then need to sort of relate to others with that mindset, with a mindset that's more, with that more real mindset. So, and this is, as I say, the last section of my talk, because, how we relate to others is really important. In a way, this is the crux of how we sort of take responsibility for our mind and how we affect society. So, first of all, I'll talk about what goes wrong, and then I'll talk about what goes right. So I won't say too much on the negative, but how we relate to others does often go wrong, basically. So, and it goes wrong because we've got this wrong view, remember, that we're fixed and separate, and we see others as sort of means in themselves. So we see others as a sort of as a utility. So we have friendships based on, are our friends funny or not? Are they going to make us laugh? Are they enjoyable, or are they going to give us things or not? Or where are they in the social order? And you see that at dinner parties, don't you? Sort of, you have that sort of atmosphere sometimes, and we compare ourselves with others in that way. And then also we blame others, of course. We blame others for our own mental states. If we're feeling angry, or it's because of them. Often you see that in community. Someone's annoyed with someone else and they made me feel like this. But of course, what we're saying is you have to take responsibility for your own mind. That's the key message. So nobody else can make you feel angry. Only you can make yourself feel angry. And that's, in a way, the key message really that I want to make. Because if we do blame others, then we just make it worse for ourselves and the world. And you see this, I think I see this sort of at protests as well, of course. So, sometimes I really resonate with people that say want to help the environment or whatever the cause is. I really resonate with the cause, like I really want to save the environment, I love nature. But sometimes I can see sort of, in a way, a protest is full of sort of hatred and blame and I can't help but feel, and you can agree with me or not, it's up to you, I can't help but feel that sometimes that makes the environment worse, for example. So I'm left with this feeling that is that really helping, basically? How can we really help? Because I want to help the environment too, but is, say, sort of getting angry with the world and the government, is that really going to help, or is that actually making the environment worse even? Often there's a lot of red liquid around, say, for example. So, is that making it worse? And even worse than that, what can happen in that, because we have got this group instinct, when we're in a group, and if it's based on ego and wrong view, what can happen is that the group can either turn in on itself or start to blame another group. And that's where the sort of danger really lies, doesn't it? That's the danger lies. And we've seen this, well, just down the road in Ukraine. Obviously there's one group blaming another group, wanting the land of another group, and war ensues. And and for me personally, this is why I became a Buddhist. This very fact. So my grandma, I've told this story a few times, but I think it is relevant here. My grandma, when she was 9, was moved out of her home forcibly and made to live in the ghetto. So she's living in Germany in the Second World War. She was forced out of her home and she had to live in a ghetto in Poland with all her family. And the only reason for that was because she was Jewish. And when they were in the ghetto, her mother got an opportunity to send my grandma to England on a train that was trying to save refugees. And my great grandma had to make the choice, like, do I keep my child or send them on a train where I might not ever see them again, but that way they might survive, or do I keep them with me? And luckily for me, she did make that choice to put her on that train, and she came to the UK and she survived. She was fostered, she survived, and of course the rest of her family were murdered. My grandma, sort of being a 9-year-old, couldn't speak English. She sort of had to learn how to live here, and in the end, she met, actually, it turned out okay. She met my grandpa, who's from Manchester, and married and 2 children, and here I am. But when I was growing up, I really didn't know what to make of that. I didn't really know what to make of that, because on the one hand, I felt an affinity for sort of being Jewish and the history, and she's survived, and do I have a responsibility in a sense to be Jewish, if you seem to pass on the line, so to speak, and lots of Jewish people didn't survive, other people as well, of course, were also murdered, but do I have the responsibility? But I also had an instinct that I didn't quite want to be sort of Jewish or in a group, any sort of group that was sort of insular. And I felt like the world was bigger than that almost. And of course, in any group, there's always a sort of this group dynamic where there's sort of a rhetoric, isn't it, that this group is the best group, isn't it? Even, you definitely had a bit of that being Jewish, and it's sort of very common in most groups, really, and it wasn't very outward looking. So I went to a non-Jewish school, a Manchester Grammar, and I ended up basically, if you were Jewish, you knew who else was Jewish, so you ended up sort of having these lunchtime breaks just in a circle of Jewish people, Jewish boys in a circle sort of thing. And partly, again, that was quite nice because you had instant friends who all knew each other really well, and there's a lot of intimacy and friendship, instant friendship. And I wasn't even that good at sport. Everyone gasps. So I wasn't in the sort of rugby crew or the football crew or anything. So it was actually really nice that I had this sort of crew, just by the sake, just from who I was. And sometimes we'd let in other people that weren't Jewish, and they'd even like it as well, and they'd like the sort of community, and that felt really good to me. But on the other hand, there are all these sort of hidden rules, and like you had to be each other's friend in a certain way. You couldn't really be other people's friends, and you had to spend time with them. And if you say you were interested in something like meditation or something else, that was you were sort of a bit on the outside. And and there was a sort of pressure as well to conform and be successful, and it's a very sort of tight community like that. So, and of course, you have to believe in God and all that sort of stuff. And I just didn't believe in God and didn't believe in that. And then when I was at school, when I was about 18 or something like that, I realised I didn't really believe in God, or didn't really I didn't believe in God, but I was still Jewish at the same time. Like say I felt like if you're a Christian or something, you could just say, I don't believe in God, then you're normal. But I felt like I didn't believe in God, I didn't really want to be Jewish, but somehow people used to people did used to say, there was a bit of anti-Semitism basically around, other people used to sort of make sly comments or sort of, and I wanted to say, oh, hang on, but I don't believe in God, someone to say a sly comment, and I'm like, yeah, but am I actually Jewish? I don't know. So there was a bit of that going on all the time. Like, it's a bit of an identity crisis, is what I'm trying to say. On one hand, I liked it, on the other hand, what even is it, if you see what I mean? And and I think that's the same in a way, for all of us, we all have to figure out who we are, and in some ways be proud of our identity and where we've come from, and on the other hand, sort of feel like you can go beyond that, because that's what the Sangha is trying to do. Actually, trying to be a place where you can go, where you can be who you are, be an individual to your fullest extent. And there are, and the good thing is that once you're ordained, you really see that there's lots of different order members around, and they really are individual. There's not just one sort of collective that's all the same. So you want to be individual, and at the same time, you want to be in connection with others. Doing it in association with others. And I think the Sangha really lets you do that. And more than and I feel like I found the solution, because the other side of that is that the Sangha doesn't try and oppose itself to any other group either. So of course, when you've got like for example, the extremes like Nazism, isn't it? As we've heard about, that's like really one group saying it's the other group's fault, let's murder them. That's basically what they're saying, which sounds crazy to say it, but that's actually what happened like only 100 years ago. And of course, actually, it is actually happening, just not in Europe, but elsewhere in Africa and places like that, still even to this day. But that is the extreme of what can happen. But we're saying in the Sangha that we're trying to go. We're not. Yes, we are a collective of practitioners, but we're not in opposition to any other group. In fact, we're trying to sort of, in a way, reach out to the rest of the world society and, in a way, invite them in if they want to come in, to also practice Buddhism and the Dharma, also practice the truth and have a mind that they can take responsibility for themselves, and have a mind that goes beyond the sort of needing material wealth, a mind that goes beyond that. So we're trying to say, look, we've got this group, this Sangha together that can sort of invite others in. So you can see that we're not in opposition to anyone. In fact, we're trying to help the world. And I think we're trying to help the world in a way that really can help the world, because the more we're doing this together, the more we can we then encourage each other to practice, and the more we're together, the more there's an atmosphere of right view. There's an atmosphere of what we're really trying to do, an atmosphere of truth, of beauty, of meaning, and I've really benefited from that myself. I feel like I've learned a lot from being part of this Sangha, like learn how to practice, how to go beyond cravings and anxieties and all that to some extent. And I've also feel like I've learned a lot about myself as well. And that's as I was saying to Amala. So being friends with people in the Sangha, and this is sort of what you don't get. Yeah, being friends with people in the Sangha means that you learn about yourself. And I think this is often what's missing in other groups outside of the Sangha. Like for example, the group that I was growing up in, the sort of Jewish group, I never really got any feedback about how I'm doing, if you see what I mean. Sometimes people were annoyed at me for various things, but they wouldn't sort of say, oh, by the way, Dayanatha, I think you need to look at this, and go away and practice and come back. And they'd just be like, you just sort of don't communicate like that, do you? You just sort of want to have a good time, really. You don't really want to fall out or anything. Or on the other extreme, if you fall out with someone, then you've really, often there's no way of getting back in harmony. A lot of the time you fall out and it's really serious. But in the Sangha, what I've noticed, what I really appreciate is that people can give each other feedback and you don't fall out, and you really appreciate it because it helps you grow. Emily Odin and I we're in a chapter together. So once you're in a chapter, once you're ordained, you in a group where you meet once a week and you go through your practice and your ethics together. And Emily Odin was recently. Sometimes he was saying to me, which I think was really good. He was saying to me sometimes I can be overcritical about other people, say, and I thought about it, but his point was, how about sort of can you be critical of your own practice and sort of turn that back on yourself, so that you sort of can then be the best practitioner you can be, which will then really help people. And at the time, I just felt that was really good. I felt that's just what I needed to hear, if you see what I mean, because I was going around being a bit negative about other people, say, and he was saying, don't need to do that. Just focus on your own practice, and then the rest will take care of itself. And I was really grateful for it, for saying that, because it was a bit, it was a bit awkward having to say that to me, probably, and it was a bit strong, the message, but I felt like, wow, that I sort of feel liberated, and almost like that ego sense sort of felt a bit deflated almost, but in a really positive way. Like I felt like, I can just relax now. I don't need to be this person that's sort of being critical or thinking various things about different people. So, and that's just one example. I feel like I've learned a lot about myself through friendship like that, through being part of the Sangha. And it's very, very beautiful. I found that very beautiful and inspiring, actually, and just very, this is like very real communication, and that's what you can get when you're practicing together. And that, of course, fosters then contentment, a simple life, and feeds back into our own practice. So, in other words, we're using that group instinct, which is so strong. We need to use that to be in association with others in a positive way. So we use that to connect with others, but also at the same time keep our individual practice and learn from each other, rather than using the group instinct to sort of form groups that are against other groups or be too cliquey or clubby or something. We use the group instinct positively to form Sangha. And I feel like that's what we really do here. And even today, it's been really lovely to see people come like yourselves, come and sort of share in that atmosphere of depth and meaning, and also just the joy of it, of having other people that are also practicing together and who you can talk to about your practice. And in a way, so we don't have to do it on our own. Just from a practical sake, it's good to have people like Lung and the team have really, without them, we couldn't have done today, for example. But then more than just the practical, of course, there's an intimacy, a friendship, a bond, which encourages me to keep on practicing. Sometimes I feel like I wouldn't practice. If I was just on my own, I probably just wouldn't practice, I think. I don't really need that encouragement and inspiration from the Sangha. I need, in a way, it's like I need faith in other people's faith, so I can practice. And anyway, it's got to the summary now. So I think when the way to do that really is just to keep coming back and make friends. So you sort of meet other people one to one, and you sort of, in a way, the way to make friends is just to be as honest as you can be. So really open. You're just trying to open up and be honest, even about what you think of each other. You want to establish some connection, obviously, I think this. Say what you think of each other, and the positives as well as the negatives, of course, and then go and retreat together, and of course then you're trying to be on teams together as well, because the other thing is to create, once we've taken responsibility for our minds, to really feed that back into society, we have to be the sort of society that we want to be, if you see what I mean. So we have to start by turning outwards and helping others. So, and that's why we encourage people, if you want, you can become on the teams, the class teams, retreat teams, volunteer and reception, cleaning the centre, and we see a lot. We have a lot of that, and people really find it really beneficial. But that's what we need. So Dharma Dinner, who was doing the talk this morning, said that Sangharakshita, who he founded the tradition. He used to sometimes he'd lead a meditation, then he'd go out and he'd make the tea as well and serve the tea, and then come back and do the meditation. And I think for him it's really important that sort of those needs are being met, as well as the meditation. It's not just about meditation itself. It was like a metaphor for him trying to support the whole community. In the end, other people did take over because obviously he was too busy. But I really like that story anyway. It's sort of very emblematic for me that we can always serve tea, basically. If we don't know what to do, serve tea. You can write that down. So where does that take us? So in a way, that takes us to the summary of the talk. So in summary, so the society we want starts with taking responsibility for our own minds in the way that we're saying. And we do that, first of all, we start off by seeing how are we actually seeing the world. Let's be honest with ourselves. How are we looking at the world? What drives us? What are our views? What do we really want? What do we really believe that's going to really help and make a difference in our lives? So we have to start with that. And then we have to think about how do we practice that? How do we put that into practice? We have to understand we're moral agents in the world. We have an agency, so we need to be responsible for our ethics. We need to practice meditation so we can realise that vision. But what we do in life, how we is really important. How we do that, and finally, how do we relate to each other? And remember, when we're saying basically we need to relate to each other as spiritual friends on the path, and that really is the whole of the spiritual life in the ways that I've been describing. So in a way, all I can do is ask us, can our Sangha be the nucleus for a new society? So can we come together, practice, and in a way radically transform society by practicing together? Can we be the sort of the hub of a society, a group that then seeds the rest of society? Can we do that? Because I really think we can. And when we do that, when we're an effective Sangha, we can do that. And all we need to do is keep practicing and remember that that if we base our practice on truth, value, meaning, we see the good in other people, and we practice in line with reality, then we'll get to the society that we really want for the benefit of all beings. Thanks very much.
Very, very much for that, Dayanatha. Yeah, I thought what Dayanatha does very well in his talks is he takes what can be quite abstract principles and he makes them very concrete. So he brings in examples from his life, and you've done that really well, I thought, in this particular talk. Brought in examples from your life, and it's been a very full life and lots of experience to it, and you really brought that in as well. I love this thing of the macaws too. It's fantastic, and the muscles attached to the body. So I thought that sort of you've just evoked Dharmic principles, the Buddhist principles, very, very well amongst real, concrete, and sort of everyday examples. Thank you very much for that, Dayanatha. Very, very much appreciated. Yeah, thank you. So that's what we'll leave it at there for the talk. But what we just remind again, at 6:00 we'll have food, so do stay for that, and then after that we'll have the Mitra ceremonies as well, and that's the real highlight of the day, and the amongst the year, one of the highlights of the year, those Mitra ceremonies. So do stay around. It's open to absolutely everybody. You don't need to be a Mitra, just come along, and hopefully see you there. Okay, maybe if we just have on long, you have one thing.
Just dinner's being served in Mandala.
In the Mandala, okay, so it's the building next door. So you go out to the centre and you turn left. It's the building directly to the left. So before we go, let's just have one more thank you for Dayanatha.